Same question. Other than Iraq, three most important enemies to the United States.
We have no important enemies. What we need to do is begin to deal with the rest of the world as equals, and we don't do that. We spend more as a nation on defense than all the rest of the world put together. Who are we afraid of? Who are you afraid of? I mean, it is unbelievable. The military-industrial complex not only controls our government, lock, stock, and barrel, but they control our culture.
Senator Edwards, same question.
Okay, that's enough for you.
Three most...
I hate your fucking guts, but I love you all so much. Sometimes you make me overcome with grief, but you're everything I need.
I got higher education for you, vaccinations for you, and all kinds of experimental medications for you. I got professors and doctors, indoctrinated kids, and media outfits to tell you just how great it is. We concentrated it, now you must depend upon banking institutions integrated with the Pentagon. It's been said we spread malice and greed, but the benefits are limitless. We got everything you need. While you were sleeping, we came and took it all away. Yeah, you can bet the farm on that. You never saw us creeping, and that's how it is gonna stay. That's why they say, that's why they say, that's why they say.
Military-industrial complex.
I hate your fucking guts.
That's what they say.
Welcome, everybody. This is UCY Radio. This is the Voice of Rebellion program. Now, second show that we've done. This is June 14th, 9:02 p.m. on the East Coast, 6:02 on the West Coast. Welcome all listeners from all around the world, from the United States or wherever you're listening overseas. This is the Voice of Rebellion Radio with your one and only host, Chris J., and I have my co-host, Al Suarez, for part of the show. And this will be a show about, this is our international show. Voice of Rebellion Radio is going international today, meaning we are going to go a little bit beyond some of the domestic issues that a lot of people do know about in the truth movement. And we're going to go to some of the political side and break it down to true foreign policy that the United States has, not the one the media portrays that the United States has, the true one. And we're going to focus on three countries today because we could go on and on and on, you know, about policy of the United States in the past and policy of the United States today and when it's done. But we're going to talk about Ukraine. We're going to talk about Venezuela. We're going to talk about Syria today. And I know there's three different countries that don't seem that related, but believe me, they actually are, as there is one common denominator to what is causing their either A, regime change, or B, what is happening in Ukraine, which is a regime change throughout the country. However, they're trying to, in East Ukraine, trying to, you know, separate and be almost like, if it finished, it would almost be like a West-East Germany scenario, you know, and actually in a lot of ways very similar, you know, and how it's split up and where it probably would be split up if the country actually became two countries, West and East Ukraine. In Eastern Ukraine, you have the pro-Russian side. It's a bit different than, of course, West and East German politically, because, you know, the people that are fighting for freedom in East Ukraine probably wouldn't support exactly what happened with the Stasi and all this other stuff that was in East Germany. Even though I would say the propaganda against them were a little bit exaggerated. But yeah, Al Shores.
I was under the impression the show was going to be on Syria and Venezuela. I'm very informed of Ukraine, but are we going to go into Syria and Venezuela first or Ukraine?
You know, it's like I'm thinking, how about this? We're going to talk about Venezuela first, since this is the part of the show you'll be on. I know you're going to have to leave early. Then I'm going to talk about Ukraine. I want to talk about Syria, because what I'm talking about is Syria will go along with, and I know it's like, I'm not just saying this to keep the listeners on the airwaves for the next 2 hours, but at 10:55 at the very end of the show, I'm going to announce a very big news regarding the future of UCY's TV and Voice of Rebellion Radio, and a major thing is coming for the show. And I don't want to even I'm not going to hint at too much because I don't want to spoil a surprise, but I am even shocked myself that this is happening. But it's happening, and it's amazing. I never saw it would actually happen. But, yeah, okay, let's talk about Venezuela first. And Venezuela is a country in South America that has a long history in the past of it was controlled by a pro-United States, practically a dictatorship from all the way back.
Let's go back a little further, though, right? Because Simón Bolivar was a member of the upper classes of the province of Venezuela when it was under Spanish control. And he rebelled against his class. He was raised by Simón Rodriguez, who was a free thinker. His tutor practically raised him. His parents died when he was young. So he was brought up as a free thinker rather than a member of the bourgeoisie. Ultimately abolished his slaves and took part in a revolution against the Spanish Empire. And that was the direct legacy to Chavez, who was a Bolivarian. He actually renamed Venezuela the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. So they saw the role of the U.S. or American imperialists similar to that of the Spanish imperialists, a similar struggle to, the 100+ years prior, the time of Bolivar. And he was known as the liberator of several Latin American nations, but he originated from Venezuela.
Well, he liberated 6 different countries. Those would be Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, parts of Brazil,
Panama,
and Ecuador. Those are the 6 that he liberated.
Panama was part of Colombia. The Grand Colombia included 3 countries, right? It was Panama, Colombia, and Peru that he liberated. And Venezuela. And he liberated Peru alongside Simón Bolivar, who was alongside San Martin, who was the Argentine liberator.
Yeah, and it was about the same time. It was in the early 1800s, and one thing that happened, at the time, Simón Bolivar. He was originally Venezuelan he was from Caracas, but he was from the upper classes, but he ended up fighting for Colombia's independence, Gran Colombia's independence, and he lived some time in Bogota. He's a national hero in Colombia. Ironically, I would say this because a lot of the things that Colombia stands for nowadays, it's government. I'm saying not the people, but a lot of the people too have been brainwashed by the government, much like it goes on in the United States. They stand for a lot of things that Bolivar wouldn't stand for, and Colombia has isolated itself from the rest of South America. With most of South America being, to the left, pink-tide, where many countries have elected socialist, anti-imperialist governments. Venezuela being the start of it in 1998. And then right now, 4 of the 6 countries that were part of Gran Colombia, or 4 of the present-day countries, are now socialist. That would be Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. Especially in Bolivia is almost at a core with one of the cores, with Evo Morales. These became somewhat alongside of Correa and Maduro, the 3 main faces nowadays of the Bolivian movement. Evo Morales
is pretty much centrist, much like Chile, but Bolivia certainly is to the left, more center left than center or center right. Correa is a charismatic figure who's center left. Maduro, pretty much center left, perhaps just as leftist as Chavez. But whatever direction you're pointing them, they're certainly anti-imperialist. They're certainly Bolivarian and socialistic in their own ways. Like we mentioned in the last show, I believe, 62% of the wages are invested in social development in Venezuela alone. And if you look at the developed nations and how little goes into helping and developing the society as a whole, you see the contrast between capitalism and a more socialistic society.
Well, and it's like when talking about the contrast, it's like in Colombia there's this perceived perception. I'm sorry if I'm going too much about Colombia today, but it's just that personal experience. What I saw on Facebook today with many of Colombian, compatriots, family and stuff is that a lot of them were just because of a stupid, football game. They all were saying,
soccer.
yeah, they were saying stuff about, Venezuela's Bolivian revolution because they lost that game, and starting to say all this stuff. And, and a lot of times they go back to Venezuela, they always start to, the media to often invoke Colombian nationalism against Venezuela. And oftentimes in Colombia's society, they talk about the time where a lot of Colombians were, worked as servants and maids and stuff in Venezuela. But I always say, hey, wait a minute. That was under capitalism. That was under the American economic system. That was when the Yankees were still in South America. But now that that's gone, the exploitation's a lot less. You can't blame the people there. You have to blame the system. The system is causing the exploitation, and that's what happens. And nowadays things are a lot different. And the Venezuelan people definitely don't have the same feeling a lot of Colombian people do. Towards the other, the Venezuelan people don't see it as a national struggle. They see it as an international struggle of the poor against the elite. But the Colombian people struggle to see it past the national issue between, past Colombia versus Venezuela because they have been brainwashed by the media, much like Americans can't see stuff past the national, America, aspect. And it's a class struggle. People need to realize it's a class struggle, and it's the truthers. Someone will deny this, but who are the people that control the New World Order? I ask you, the super rich, the elite, the people with so much money that they have more money than you, your family, and your whole neighborhood and their families, and your whole city combined. These people have, like the Rothschild family, have net worth of trillions of dollars. It's definitely a class problem when most of us in the United States struggle just to make it by. 50% of us at least, are under what international standards of poverty, which means you can't pay your bills, is kind of what the international standard of poverty is. And there's these people are so rich, that 400 will make up 80% of the money in the United States. It is a class issue, and people need to see it that way. I know, get off on tangent again, but.
Well, when people get off on tangents like on sexism and racism, they're forgetting that none of this will change without the class struggle. So in socialism, you have a society where rather than an elite control the rest of society, the ruling class oppressing the other social classes, you have a more egalitarian society, a more just society, based on the working class rights of the workers and the peasants within the society, those that are downtrodden and oppressed under the capitalist system.
I'm wondering right now is like what remember we had Bob from the South that called in that one show. I wonder if he's like right now like having a heart attack. He's like, oh my God, those terrorists are socialists too. It's like, somebody give me the number for Department of Homeland Security. I have a feeling it's going on somewhere in Texas. Oh my gosh. Also a lot of the truthers unfortunately would have the same opinion. And I don't get what some people see so great about capitalism, because capitalism leads to fascism. They might say, well, I'm capitalist, but I'm against the fascist system. However, let me ask you, how did fascism, what's its root? It's capitalism. When capitalism, when the rich get too rich, they become so rich that they control the government. When they control the government, then the government and the corporations get tied together. That is the definition of fascism. Really, when capitalism goes screwy, like Lenin said, when fascism is capitalism in decay. And of course, some of these same people would hate to believe that Lenin had such profound wisdom like that, but that was the profound wisdom that Lenin had, and it was a quote that everybody should remember. Is that it's like a lot of people root fascism back to socialism or communism, which is not, by the political spectrum. That's on the opposite sides of the spectrum, and it's whole different ideals. Maybe the result sometimes ends up like when Stalin ends up similar to fascism. However, the ideology is in socialism or communism is to give the poor control, and actually, as Marx said to get rid of the state. In fascism,
I'm going to
the
read a quote
ideology is to give
before I
corporations
go,
and the
and
government power over the rest of society.
you can hear me?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
said before I go, I'm going to read a quote, and then I suggest that you put the number up in the show in case anybody wants to call to ask us questions. In the quote, like last show, our first show, we're talking about the Spanish Civil War, and since then I read a second book about the Spanish Civil War that I just finished, and that's very relevant if you're talking about fascism, which originated in Europe. So if you bear with me a moment, I'm going to read a quote. This was a book written not by George Orwell, which was the last one about the Spanish Civil War, but by a German leftist, a journalist, in no sense a Stalinist, who went down to Spain and traveled to many areas, more areas than even Orwell did. He went on 2 trips to Spain in 1936 and 1937, and it goes like this. This is in the last part of the book. This civilization is not under discussion in this book, which is devoted only to the problems of the Spanish Civil War. Still, at the end of the investigation, it is worthwhile to say one word about the Spanish conception of life, which is so impermeable to European influence. The European, who instinctively only appreciates progress, change, is horrified by the stagnation of Spanish life, for what he must call Spanish inefficiency. This inefficiency, being almost the key to the present trend of events, had to be given ample consideration in these pages. But if the reader is inclining to include from all this that Spain is a rotten country, he is misled. The fact is that almost every foreign observer, whether watching the right or the left camp, has felt an almost magical attraction. Many a foreign specialist and technical advisor has dropped his job in fury and despair, deciding to leave these wretched Spaniards to themselves, and still could not get away from them. People with a political faith usually ascribe it to the supreme importance of the Spanish fight for the future of mankind. Important as the Spanish Civil War doubtless is, I still believe that its importance is sometimes exaggerated. But this is not the essential point. The deep attraction of Spain consists, in my opinion, not so much in its importance, but in its national character. There, life is not yet efficient. That means that it is not yet mechanized. That beauty is still more important for the Spaniards than practical use. Sentiment more important than action. Honor very often more important than success. Love and friendship more important than one's job. In one word, it is the lure of a civilization near to ourselves, closely connected with the historical past of Europe, which has not participated in our later developments towards mechanism, the adoration of quantity, and of the utilitarian aspect of things. In this lure exerted by Spain upon so many foreigners, and the author of this book is emphatically among those who have been deeply attracted, is implied the concession, unconscious very often, it is true, that after all something seems to be wrong with our own European civilization, and that the backward, stagnant, and inefficient Spaniard can well compete in the field of human values with the efficient, practical, and progressive European. The one seems predestined to last, unmoving throughout the cataclysm of the surrounding world, and to outlive national usurpers and foreign conquerors. The other, progressive, may progress towards his own destruction. And I found that really prophetic because that was written just before the start of World War II, a couple of years before the end of the Spanish Civil War. But it really put things in contrast with the Spanish culture and how, even to this day, you have a lot of that intact there.
Yes. It's like, you talk about, some writers being prophetic, it's like in many ways, Orwell, who also fought in the Spanish Civil War, was prophetic, in the same way. Of course, it was 1984, very prophetic, and it's the Spanish Civil War also, Ernest Hemingway was in that war, who also was in World War I. And Hemingway was actually a bit older, I think, when he was in Spanish Civil War. He wasn't actually fighting. I believe he was in...
Well, Hemingway was not fighting in World War I. He was a journalist, and he was injured in Italy during World War I. Remember, Italy was on the side of the Allies, wasn't on the side of the Germans in the first one.
Yeah, that time it was
on. He became a fighter by the time of the Spanish Civil War. He became more politicized by then.
Yes.
Orwell himself was not very politicized. Like when he wrote his first book, I believe it was his first book, not How Much Catalonia, that he wrote for Spain, when he wrote Down and Out in Paris and London, when he was homeless. he had been a writer, but he'd been struggling, and he wrote about his experience. And at that point, he wasn't politicized. Obviously, by the time Orwell went to the Spanish Civil War, it became more politicized. And that's an event in the history of Europe that is not covered enough. You know, these books are gems. You know, from the survivors, from people that were there. You know, and Hemingway, to protect himself, wrote a fiction about the Spanish Civil War, which I've read. It's called For Whom the Bells Toll. He's written 2 books in Spain. The other one is about bullfighting, Death in the Afternoon. But and Farewell to Arms, I believe, is about War One. So he wrote at least 3 books. 2 books about war. But yeah, a lot of these people that joined the National Brigades, they lost their citizenship. They were thrown in jail for returning to the States or to Britain or wherever, because they didn't have the fortune of being known writers like Hemingway and Orwell. But you know, particularly in the United States, they were persecuting a lot of brigaders. So you know, Hemingway, to protect himself, made the book a fiction. Of course, it was based primarily on fact, on his experiences in the Spanish Civil War, and he romanticized it as well.
Yes, and you know, in the Spanish Civil War, I mean, what it was, it's you know, next thing we're going to talk about. You know, I'm not going to actually start it now. But Ukraine, it parallels very similar in many ways.
Yes, there are actually brigades going to Ukraine. You want to put the number out of the show real quick?
No, I'm looking for the. I have the number for the show. I
can
give
put
me
it
a
out.
couple
I
weeks.
have it in the picture that I shared recently. If you give me a sec.
Yeah, it's like give me a couple weeks. I'll know it by heart. Like I had the other numbers of, but there it is, 718-717-8296. To say that again, 718-717-8296. Anybody wants to call in, please don't be shy. I
want to mention today is the birthday of Che Guevara.
Oh yeah, he was born. That means that today he would have been
87.
Yep, 1928. Which that's kind of weird. I mean, it's like because he's been gone so long. I mean, he's been gone almost 50 years, 47 years this year since he was executed. So it's almost kind of weird that if he wasn't executed, he could have been with us today, even though I doubt it because he had such a stressful life, especially in his 50s.
Well, he was extremely asthmatic. I believe he has a younger brother who's still alive, but his father lived a long life also. But who knows if he would have been alive still or not, because there are people with asthma that still go into an older age. But I don't think he was destined to live a long life. You know, he was destined to die gloriously, and he was always close to death, not just because of his condition, right, of being asthmatic, but when he chose the path of a revolutionary. But I think that it's fitting that we have our Voice of Rebellion episode on the birthday of Che. I forgot that it was today. Otherwise, it would have been set up to be the main topic of the show. But no matter where you're talking about in the world, you see images of Che. In Palestine, in the anti-fascist brigades in Ukraine, even in Syria, among the Kurdish groups, several of them have images of Che. And he's really turned into a symbol, not just of rebellion, but of revolutionary consciousness, and not just of a guerrilla fight, but also of free-thinking rebels and of people that want to build the new society that he talked about. You know, he talked about the new man, referring to the men and women and the new consciousness that was coming about, inspired by the Cuban Revolution, of which he was one of the primary founders of the Cuban Republic. Upon its exiling of Batista and its end of the U.S. imperial reign over Cuba, only 90 miles from the shores of Key West.
Yeah, and Che Guevara, he in a way he was in very few top category of revolutionaries of all time. And I mean, this guy fought in 3 different revolutions. He fought in Bolivia, Cuba, in the Congo, and he fought shortly after Lumumba, who was taken out by the CIA, and there was a dictator. I saw his name recently, but I forgot what the guy's name was that took over after in the Congo. But yes, he was fighting him, and after he left Cuba, then he went to Bolivia. And now the thing is, Bolivia, Che would have been so,
I remember the president or the dictator of Bolivia's name at the time. when Che entered Bolivia. He was Barrientos, and Barrientos was a traitor. I mean, he brought in, CIA and they trained the Rangers. I mean, he took in a freaking Nazi, for God's sake, calls Barbie. I mean, this guy, Barrientos was not looking out for the Bolivian people by any means. He represented the elite 100%.
And also, yeah, he had the CIA came in. He worked with the United States. He's a direct collaborator. But I want to go ship this to Venezuela and get back on topic. Is that this is not even a one-time occasion. Look at Venezuela nowadays. The opposition is calling. I'm serious. I forgot who was in the opposition of Venezuela was calling for the United States to bomb Venezuela to take out Maduro. If that person, it's like I support free speech. I support the being able to oppose your government. Duh. Even if it is one that is like that one that's not completely corrupt, and you still have the right to oppose it. You may be wrong on your opinion, but you still have the right to do so. But asking for your country to be bombed by another country, a much larger country, which would lead to the deaths of probably millions of your own people, should be automatic treason charges brought up against this person. But they didn't even do that. And that really shows that they have shown some restraint, the Bolivian government, because I'm pretty sure someone said that, like to the media, went on CNN and said, hello, CNN, I think that Russia and Vladimir Putin should bomb the United States and take over. I think they'd probably be thrown in jail. There'd be conspiracy for something, inciting hate, something there'd be some kind of charge. They would probably, it would not end up good. And in many of the countries the United States supports, like if you said in Saudi Arabia that Iran should bomb Saudi Arabia to the media, you would be beheaded and probably stoned at the same time in front of a public viewing of thousands of people. And that's the United States heavily finances the Saudi Arabians, even with the genocide in Yemen right now, which we'll get to after when we get to Syria towards the end of the show. But that's Venezuela is it's interesting. It's now going on 17 years. I mean, my entire life that Venezuela since they had the revolution, and so much has been accomplished. Nowadays, the workers have direct control of economic policy in Venezuela, and on May Day, it was announced that they'd be paid, I think, 30% higher, and also in Venezuela,
so much has also been done to try to counter the Venezuelan revolution, right? All the acts of sabotage. And in spite of all of that, they've still been able to make incredible changes to the country. And unite with other Latin American nations, inspire the movement and the democratic revolutions of socialism in the 21st century, the Bolivarian movement. See, I was really tired, Chris, for working the past couple of days. When you start talking about Bolivarianism, that's going to wake me up.
Yeah, when wakes think about that, it's like think about all the energy the Bolivian Revolution had, not just the energy politically, but talk about literally the energy physically, almost on a spiritual level. These people, these formerly disenfranchised, workers that were living in poverty in the slums in Caracas in the 90s, in the time of Carlos Perez, and in the time of
I'm sure there's going to be a Venezuelan delegation in Philly. These forums always have people from Latin America come and speak. Like at the Left Forum a couple years ago, they had the vice president of Bolivia come and speak. I'm going to the forum in Philly in a couple weeks. Matter of fact, we have one more show before I go to Philly. And I really hope to meet comrades there and to talk to them about Voice of Rebellion Radio and our efforts to spread the word of revolution.
Well, yeah, definitely. And talk about when you get there, you promote Voice of Rebellion Radio. I mean, we went to links, nowadays to international links where our show gets out to people in Macedonia, in East Europe, and many places, in Venezuela. Also, I wanted to mention though, that I was continuing the energy though, the Bolivian Revolution. Talk about the Bolivian Revolution. It's just that you saw at the rallies. It was a whole unique experience, I would say, politically, like what we saw where these people would be all riled up, they're jumping for joy as he would empower Hugo Chavez. Like very few leaders could empower the people to that point. During his rallies, during Hugo Chavez, stood out there in 2012 with cancer, stood out there or recovering from cancer, stood out there in the rain and continued to do a speech and continued to rally the poor and the people that would support him, not just the poor support him. That's kind of a myth about the Venezuelan situation. There are rich people that in Venezuela that accept that the super rich have what they do to the poor and do not support it. And there are, sure, it's a predominantly working class, it's a predominantly grassroots movement, the Bolivian Revolution. I mean, but it was literally Hugo Chavez didn't inherit political predominance to get the power. Hugo Chavez did not join a already powerful group. He practically made the Fifth Republic movement by himself. He had, was in his supporters. He had made the MBR 200 by himself in the 80s, that led to his becoming famous. The MBR 200 was the clandestine socialist group inside of the Venezuelan. It was clandestine because the Venezuelan government heavily opposed it because they were working with the United States. And, so he was a clandestine, and then in '92 he was thrown in jail in the coup attempt. However, the president had thrown him in jail, was being charged for extortion not much later, and he was actually released in '94 from prison.
He took full responsibility for the coup attempt, and he had the moral high ground. That shows some integrity, and he got a lot of sympathy from the Venezuelan people. So by the time that he got out of jail a few years later, but in late '90s, he had a support base. I hate to have to leave it there, Chris, but I need to get some rest. Keep up the discussion on Ukraine, on Syria, etc., and see if we can get some callers.
Yeah, I know you've had a long day, Al. So it was good that you came on this amount. We did. It was a quarter of the show. Believe it or not, I guess the show. You kept up your promise and you did 30 minutes of the show, and so it's good. Get some sleep.
Next Sunday I will be available for the entire
but
show.
But don't say the topic of the show, Al.
I'm not going to say. You said it at the end of the show.
I don't want the surprise.
I'm not going to give away the secret, comrade. You know that. All right.
Okay. I didn't want. Yeah, I'm keeping this a secret until.
Adios.
Oh my God! I'm keeping everybody on the airwaves till 10:55, and they're going to be worth it. They're going to be like, they're not going to think that I just overly hyped the secret that is being revealed in an hour and 22 minutes, and but if people that are going to be on the air, they're going to be blown away by what I have to say, and it's a lot. Let's just say that's talked about a lot in the truth movement, especially the anti-Zionists. This event that's kind of hushed up, and I know some people that. Never mind. I'm not going to go any further because people might start to have ideas. I want them to just be blown away, be like, "Holy shit, that is crazy!" But anyways, I'm going to put out the number one more time in case people didn't catch it 15 minutes ago. 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296. This is UCY TV, Voice of Rebellion Radio, with Chris J. And, as a personal witness to what has went on in South America, the energy, though, of the Bolivian Revolution and what has been done, it's a momentum. It's going, we're almost 2 decades in Venezuela, and, poverty has been reduced second most in the region, only to Bolivia, which is Evo Morales is in charge of Bolivia. Venezuela is the Venezuela. They've had 2 million. I think people have been able to gain literacy via the programs that have been set up. People that never would have had access to health care would have probably died from illness now have health care there. And one major thing is that the economic side, Venezuela has received their gold stockpile back, and they received their gold stockpile while the United States can't receive theirs back. The Rothschilds have been thrown out of Venezuela, pretty much. They are no longer a financial force, really, in a lot of South America, but Venezuela started the momentum, and now South America is going toward the BRICS. They're going towards the free countries, I would say. I wouldn't say, but I do have my skepticism about BRICS because I do feel like BRICS the political differences inside of BRICS. There's especially with India having a pro-Israeli government, pro-United States government. I think that India might not be a part of BRICS coming soon. Neither really China or South Africa. I don't know. I have some serious doubts about those two, especially South Africa, because they've had in recent years kind of a alliance with the United States. So I don't know how this will all work out. And China is, at times, they do rely on the United States to sell their goods, and it seems like they have a somewhat on and off relationship. So it is worrying, but I know for sure that Brazil, Russia will have a strong alliance, and this Bolivian revolution, also led to Brazil being what it is today. Even though it's not as, radical as a revolution as what happened in Venezuela, they are still center left. Lula was center left, and now Rousseff is in charge of the country. So the Bolivian revolution is definitely it might have had. It's not 100% perfect thing. Any revolution, I would say, and I would point to maybe what has happened with Brazil, especially in 2014 with the World Cup. The World Cup protests that were based on, the government not really having their priorities straight there. But in Venezuela, it really has done nothing but, good for the poor people of the country and the middle class of the country. And really anybody that's not the super rich of the country. The super rich, of course, have this phony coalition of opposition, but this coalition of the opposition in Venezuela is supported directly by the United States. Or in 2014, when the protests broke out, those people were being told pretty much by United States agents what to do, and were being violent. In fact, I find it funny that Ferguson, where there was legitimate protests happening over the outrage of a police brutality towards a 18-year-old black man, Michael Brown, who was killed very unjustly, 170 feet away from the police, running away. And what was his crime? Did he murder somebody? Did he kidnap somebody? Did he assault somebody? No. He had done $1 worth of theft by stealing a pack of cigarillos. And I'll just say, I'll just put it out there. It's like, if you ever been in a convenience store, those things are about one of the most easiest things to steal. Not advocating stealing your local convenience store, but I'm saying that it's a crime that a lot of people do. And it's not good that they do it. But I'm just saying is that it happens all the time, and he shouldn't have faced the death penalty over it. And you should have been. I don't think that he should even have been shot at. He wasn't committing a crime of violence towards somebody. But anyways, I've got off on a tangent. Is that this horrible event that happened in Ferguson, Missouri? The Ferguson protest. They were Fox News was showing pictures. Or actually, this is Baltimore. I haven't completely confused. Baltimore was the one that Fox News was showing pictures from Venezuela of buildings on fire. And the thing is, Fox News supports the Venezuelan opposition, the violent rioters in Venezuela that were setting big buildings on fire and stuff. They were showing pictures really, that they're in reality we're denouncing the people that they support, because those are yeah. Don't get me wrong; those Venezuelan opposition that do the rioting down there, they do step over the line. In Baltimore, it was exaggerated. The media had exaggerated the amount of rioting that happened compared to the amount of peaceful protests and the amount of cover-up, secrecy, wrongful acts by the government and the police in Baltimore towards Freddie Gray. Freddie Gray was. Let me remind you of what happened there too. He was tortured in the back of a cop van for 2 hours. They severed his spine and they left him so long in the cop van that he never received medical attention because he died back there. And they expect him, like this is normal. Like this is a normal event. This is a normal air, and that we should just accept this. And many people were stating that rioters were in the wrong. And the rioters, yes, it's not probably the way to go about it, especially not, when I say about rioting, like pick your targets well. It's like, why burn down your mom and pop's cake shop when they have done nothing to hurt regular people, but corporations that pay poverty wages, influence the government to make policies that oppress the poor. Well, I don't give a shit if you burn down Walmart, but I do give a shit if you burn down, honest people trying to make an honest living. So, and also I want to point out another thing is that Wells Fargo for years had been putting out in Baltimore, loans that people couldn't afford. Then when they couldn't afford those loans, they had torn down big amounts. I think 1,200 houses were torn down by them in Baltimore. So where was the anger about that private property being destroyed when Wells Fargo did it? But when a bunch of angry youth, mostly, had done it, all of a sudden it was a big deal. And Venezuela, going back to them, they have stood in solidarity, their government with the Occupy Wall Street, many of the movements in the United States. Occupy Wall Street, they had denounced, how badly the protesters are treated. I mean, you saw all the videos, right? The pepper spray, of a crowd control pepper spray can, not a one being used for a regular person. And they weren't even doing anything wrong to get pepper spray. They were just sitting in pretty much a sit-in protest. And then he comes in with a crowd control pepper spray container, literally dousing this woman's face in pepper spray. Then this cop has the nerve to sue the police force for psychological damage that he had endured doing that, which I find a little bit ridiculous, because if he knew this was so horrible, why is he just standing there doing that? Well, he doesn't just just stop after 2 seconds, like, oh my God, this is wrong. No, he goes on and on. It looks like in the video. And this poor woman, you would think that someone would die almost with that much pepper spray being sprayed in their face. I've never been pepper sprayed, but I know that it's practically like being it's like practically hot sauce mist being sprayed at your face. So I know it can't be pleasant, and being put on your mouth and nose. This woman practically taking it right in the mouth, all this pepper spray. It's surprising that she lived. And that happened, all kinds of atrocities. I interviewed this woman, Cecily McMillan, which you might have heard her story, because it was all throughout. It actually had made the mainstream media. She was being apprehended, I think, by police. And while they came up to her, and they started feeling her breasts, and so naturally she elbowed him, not even out of anger, just like out of shock, like, oh, what? And then elbowed him, the cop, and then she not only got arrested but got charged with assault on a police, which assault on police is prison sentence. And she was sent to Rikers, where Rikers, if you've heard, even the female version of Rikers in New York City is hell. people get raped practically in the open there by the guards. There's all kinds of horror stories that just come out of there. You should look into that. It's just one more testament to the truth of the prison industrial complex that the United States has. And also, the stat that comes up is we have 1% of our country is in prison. That means that equates to 3,200,000 Americans are in prison. To put in comparison, how much that is 25% of the world's prison population is in the United States. Yet the United States only has they actually have less than 5% of the world's population. Now, as the world's population is over 7 billion, that would actually be, when you put in the calculator, it would be less than 5%. It would be like 3% of the America's population, or actually not 3%, probably around, it would be around 4%, I would think. Well, probably 4.5%. Still, it's a drastic misproportion, and compared to other countries, like ones that you think the number would be a lot higher because the media calls them, dictatorships, which, of course, that's all a big lie. Like North Korea, for example, only has 200,000 people in prison, which is still a pretty high number. But it is also a country with a lot of targeting from the United States, so probably a lot of them are spies, and they do get a lot of spies from other countries that end up there. The United States, a lot of these people are just nonviolent drug offenders. These people are being caught with marijuana. These people, they would have. These people literally, will have a gram in South Carolina. They have a no tolerance policy there, and they'll be put in jail for pretty much up to the judge's discretion. They don't really have maximums in states like South Carolina, but yet in Colorado, if you had, just happen to have 1 gram of legal weed there, you'd be fly. It would be nothing. If you were selling in South Carolina, you're definitely going to probably get 25 to life. That's for sure. I mean, there's that one guy that always comes up in the picture. He was selling pot, and he's in there for life. I think he got released though recently after like 2 decades in prison for that. Well, in Colorado, you'd be driving around a Cadillac. You'd be rich. You'd be legally rich too. And I think, though, eventually, because as you look at the 2016 corporate spokesman candidates, I don't even like to call him president anymore. When you look at that, a lot of the candidates have a statement that violates state rights. Like Chris Christie, Hillary Clinton said there will be no marijuana usage on the United States. Hillary Clinton is against all legalized weed. So I find it funny that some of these same people that would smoke weed, supposedly progressive or whatever, support Hillary Clinton. But I don't know how anybody that considers themselves leftist to any means could call Hillary, or could support Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton is definitely a corporatist. She supports Monsanto, just like Obama actually did, even though he said he wouldn't. Obama said he would stand up to Monsanto. Look at what's happened. The Monsanto Protection Act was signed 2 years ago in 2013. Hillary Clinton, I guess the word progressive, it doesn't mean anything. It's not progress. It's the same. It's the same shit for corporate control. So was the supposed progressives, and progressive shouldn't even be associated with the left. Not the American term. American term just means practically just a term that's given out. People like Obama, and people say that Obama is a socialist, which is ridiculous. Even Ron Paul, a libertarian, which most people that call Obama a socialist are libertarians, said that he's a corporatist, not a socialist, meaning that he supports corporate and state merger. He's a fascist. Obama is another one on the right. He's on the right wing, not the right moral, definitely not. He's being strung along by the Rothschild family. He's a right winger. That's what Obama is. And, that's just to say, let's not taint legitimate ideologies that would support the removal of the Rothschilds, the removal of the Rockefellers, the removal of these New World Order families from power. These people that would support the removal of all this elitist system, but yet you taint their ideology. Trotsky, for example, would be, especially if he was alive today, would be talking about how we need to overthrow the international elite all across the world, across the board, whether you're in the EU, whether you're in Russia. Watching that Russia's thrown them out already. But if you're in the United States, whether you're in India, whether you're in Colombia, whether you're in Israel, across the world, the elite have to be overthrown. And a permanent revolution could be argued that it was an ideology to overthrow the New World Order. As he said, you might say the international bourgeoisie, but it's referring to the same thing. And oftentimes, revolutionaries don't refer to it as a New World Order. I think because New World Order is kind of a new term anyways. It came up in the 20th century by these elites like Bush, who kept using that word. But really, New World Order, before it's referred to as the international bourgeoisie, the elite, the shadow leaders, or as Putin calls them, the unipolar world, is what he warns people. If a unipolar system of authority happens, we, lose all our freedom. Everybody in the world. They would have, all the world would end up looking like the United States times 10. And the whole world would end up being fascist. That's their plan, is a corporate fascist New World Order is what the elite want. And we can't let that happen. Across the board, the elite have to be overthrown. And across the world, the poor, the illiterate must stand up. And now I haven't even dove into Ukraine yet. And now it's been, I guess, I was talking about Leon Trotsky, and Leon Trotsky was from Ukraine. Lev Davidovich Brodsky. And yes, he was Jewish, but he was not pro-Zionist. In fact, a lot of his writings, along with Lenin's, were anti-Zionist. And there were Zionists, yes, in the Bolshevik Revolution. That is true. However, the Zionists were kicked out of the movement very quickly. They had to be ostracized. They had to be kicked out because because they wanted they wanted something that was not with the ideology of Trotsky and Lenin. They wanted something. They were nationalistic, but nationalistic towards a religion, nationalistic to steal land from already habited places. So they were ostracized and kicked out very quickly. It was at the very early, the old Bolsheviks. Some of them were pro-Zionist, but most of the Bolshevik Revolution was anti-Zionist, and there's no proof either. I mean, I hear these ridiculous theories about Trotsky meeting Jacob Schiff in New York, a Wall Street banker. But the funny thing is that the Romanovs, they were the ones that were definitely receiving money from the Rothschilds and receiving money from the bankers. The Romanovs were the ones they were the problem. They were being supported by the elite. Some people in the truth movement associate Romanovs with some kind of defiance to the Rothschilds because some people wrote of this fictional defiance, but I think that was propaganda at the time by some guy named Disraeli. Disraeli probably just wrote that to keep the serfs of Russia in line. There was practically a system of slavery in Russia until 1862, around the same time the United States ended slavery. But I wouldn't say that slavery was ended, just the old form of slavery was ended. Then it was just expanded to today. modern day slavery is everybody become a labor unit for some corporation. But Russia also it was a country with a big amount of poor people, and that's why the revolution ended up happening. And it was it kind of built up. I mean, in 1882, one of the czars was killed. Then in 1905, there was the Russian Revolution, the first one, not the one that actually brought the Bolsheviks to power. The one that brought the Bolsheviks to power didn't come for 12 years, 1917. And compared to 1905, 1917 was two parts and was successful. First, the Tsar was overthrown. Then they were about to bring back the Tsar, the new government, the provincial government. So they were overthrowing the October Revolution, and then Lenin, Trotsky, and all them came to power. But enough of that little story. This story is now about Ukraine, what's happened. And back in early 2014, the protests turned to riots. They got more and more heated, the situation in Ukraine. They were already these violent protesters that were rioters. They were being paid by the West. And this new government that was taking over was the Euromaidan government that was going to take over. It was a coup that happened in February of 2014. And this fascist government that took over had parts from Svoboda, right sector, and they were funded by the United States. There was no doubt about that. And then they took power after the coup. And when they took power after the coup, Crimea splits off and says they want independence, with 96.6% of the people voting to become part of the Russian Federation, splitting away from this newly fascist government in Ukraine. The United States says it's illegitimate, even though the rest of the world says it's a legitimate election. Russia, accepts the vote, and they join the Russian Federation. Then, after that, and starting in April 2014, Lugansk, Donbass, and a few other places, Odessa, start to become this. Protests are emerging in East Ukraine, mostly in Donbass. Donbass, that turns into the rebels. Turns into East Ukraine rebels fighting for independence. Turns into the actual civil war, and East Ukraine is now trying to. A lot of people in East Ukraine that are Russian descent or Russian ethnically, these Russian ethnically people are descendants from many people from Russia, and still ethnically that way. And these people are ethnically that way. They have been persecuted by the Kiev government. They actually have banned the speaking of Russian in Ukraine. It would be like Spanish being outlawed in the United States. It'd be an absolute outrage about it from a lot of the people. In Ukraine, there was an outrage in East Ukraine, and then the people rose up and started fighting the Kiev government. The West calls them terrorists, but they're really just fighting for independence, so they're not persecuted. As the West Ukrainians, the ones funded by the United States, the fascists that are in West Ukraine, they are persecuting and committing genocide against the Russians. Kiev, that is controlled now by Petro Poroshenko, who used to be an oligarch, no surprise considered it is a fascist government. Petro Poroshenko, he continues the war even after the elections in late May of 2014. The war rages on. And also, he ignores the fact that in early May of 2014, one of the worst massacres in East European history when it comes to the horrific events, and I would say in post-World War II East European history. That was a bit complicated. But Kiev and their thugs burnt a building in Odessa in parts of a violent persecution of Russians with pregnant women. Well, that was not appropriate. Sorry, that was. I mean, I'm talking about a building getting burnt up, and now we have that's horrible. Some sound of fires comes up, and last time we're talking about Iran, and that shows up. This time we're talking about Odessa, and that sound shows up. So that sound was very poorly cued, and I didn't do that, by the way. But going back to Odessa, 40 people were killed, pregnant women inside burnt alive, and West Ukraine turns a whole blind eye to it. The government turns a whole blind eye to it. They probably arranged for this, act of horror to be committed, and now it's been over a year since it's happened. Odessa was absolutely a horrible event, and then the violence started there. So now you have this whole eastern half of Ukraine is now in revolution. With the eastern half of Ukraine in revolution, West Ukraine hatches up a plan, and there's a lot of evidence to support this theory of what happened. In July 17th, 2014, an airliner from Malaysian Airlines, that was MH17, was shot down over Ukrainian territory. Of course, the West blames the East Ukrainian rebels, and there's all this hyper-sensationalized media demonization of Putin shortly after. It was British newspaper saying Putin killed all these people. 296 people were killed, but not by Putin. And it was the bullet holes that were, I think there were bullet holes on the plane. The fact is that it looks as two West Ukrainian fighter jets shot down the plane in midair, and it wasn't supportive of the theory of the SAM missile, and was the West Ukrainian jets shooting that down midair that eventually crashed. 296 were killed, and on board, the evidence showed that on board there was a lot of evidence that they took in investigations, and the only investigation, it was literally the day. It's like the United States somehow immediately knew. It's like, oh, those people did it. But when the investigations were actually done, including by the Dutch, where this plane left, going to, I believe, Singapore, and the Dutch said that this was a act by the West Ukrainians, most likely. Malaysians, same deal. Russians, of course, it ends up being that the West Ukrainians did it, and that's most of the international community, the real international community, most of it supported the theory that West Ukraine did it. And we're not demonizing Russia because Russia didn't do it, or their East Ukrainian supported rebels, and they act like it's a direct correlation between them. Like they're hired by the Kremlin to do what they do, which they might get some money, but they are not assisted militarily like everybody claims. It's these pictures of these horribly done, supposed satellite images of a convoy crossing over into Ukraine by the Russians, while the United States actually do cross into Ukraine, into West Ukraine. They are the ones that are intervening. There's paramilitaries right now in the streets of Ukraine that are enforcing the United States way into West Ukraine, and the West Ukrainians and the United States are working together. And West Ukraine actually thinks that they could beat Russia in war. And a lot of these countries around Russia, they're pressuring. They're putting military. They have so many NATO bases around Russia right now, and they say that Russia's pressuring the world. The United States and the New World Order is pressuring Russia. And I'm surprised that Putin doesn't. I mean, you'd think he'd just be so fed up with this shit that the mainstream media puts out in the West about him on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all the same corporate media garbage with special interests from mega corporations. Even a Saudi prince has a part of Fox News. Rupert Murdoch owns the other part of Fox News. So the top two people are not even American, and they claim to be the good old American news. It's not American. Apparently not. I mean, the top two people are Aussie and Saudi, and that rhymes. Somebody can put that in a line. That moral technique about the Aussie and the Saudi controlling Fox News sounds familiar, actually. I don't know. Anyways, I've been going solo for a while now. I would like for somebody to call in, give their 2 cents in the show. We are talking about Ukraine. Then we're going to be talking about Syria next. We're going to be talking about the truth about Bashar al-Assad. Who is the Free Syrian Army? How are they connected or not to ISIS? We'll find out. And after that, at 10:55, the big surprise of the show to keep everybody listening. So that is only actually now 50 minutes away from that. And this is Voice of Rebellion Radio with now just Chris J in the studio. Al Suarez was here earlier. If you're tuning in after 8 or after 9:30, used to do shows at 8. So it's like I'm an hour off my scheduling here. I think that it's earlier than it is. And it's actually now 10:06 Eastern, 7:06 Pacific time. And Ukraine continues our, this timeline. Next thing on the timeline that happened was that there was a temporary ceasefire in the fall, but now the fighting's continued. And Donetsk, that's another city there, Donetsk, Ukraine, is now practically in shambles, including the airport, and media turns a blind eye to it, and that West Ukraine is striking out a ceasefire and starting the war up again. And let me remind you also another thing about West Ukraine. West Ukraine's government put Stefan Bandera as a national hero. If anybody knows who Stefan Bandera was a Nazi collaborator that sent many Ukrainian Jews, and I think Polish Jews as well, to their deaths. So these people support a murderer. And it's funny also, and it kind of proves also one thing, is that Zionism, anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism have nothing to do with each other. Because Israel, of all countries, supports West Ukraine. And another thing that I want to put out is that, yes, as crazy as it sounds, the Nazis and the Zionists collaborated. It was marked that you can see on coins, actually, that the Nazis had of the Star of David on one side and the swastika on the other side, because there was this agreement in 1933 called the Havara Agreement. The Havara Agreement was an agreement that sent usually wealthier Jews, paid the German authorities to go to Palestine and conquer it. That was the point of it. And all these organizations that were closed down, including the Communist Party that were heavily repressed in 1933, the Zionist Federation in Germany wasn't closed down in 1937, coincidentally. Only organization besides the Nazi Party not to be closed down after 1933. So I think calling people who oppose Israel a Nazi is a little bit of ad hominem attack, I would say, or anti-Semite, which also is the most ridiculous one, because the Palestinians are the Semitic people. Most Israelis are Ashkenazi, and these people are Europeans that converted around the 8th century, and they came to Israel in 1947, and they forced the Palestinians out with a murder and chased out 1 million Palestinians. It was a tragedy. They have a word for it. It's a thing that they commemorate, and it translates roughly to the tragedy in Arabic. So the Palestinians, the Palestinians. What the truth is that these people, a lot of them, are the same biblical Jews that were, that are mentioned in the Bible. Which, even if you don't believe in the Bible, a lot of stuff was noting historical events at the time that were happening, and things that and one thing was is that yes, at that time there was Israel, and there were a lot of there, there were Jews in that area. However, the biblical Israel and Zionist Israel have absolutely no connection whatsoever, and those people that were in Israel at that time, a lot of them, when the Prophet Muhammad came around, and a lot of and Islam started to spread, a lot of those people converted to Islam. So a lot of those people are the same ones, but they don't want to admit that those people became Muslim, a few hundred years after that, and they've been Muslim since. But that would be like a defeat to the Zionist propaganda. And the thing is that in Palestine, the Christians and the Muslims stand united, and some Jews stand united. Even though a lot more Jews live in Israel, and also a lot of the African Jews that are repressed in Israel and stand in solidarity with the Palestinians. In fact, and with the African American rights movement here in the United States. They stand solidarity because they have a lot of the same common police brutality that the Israeli police do towards African Israelis that the police do here in the United States to African Americans. But I'd say it's a state versus the people issue, less than it is, or more than it is a race issue, because the United States, all people of all colors are killed unjustly by police, and the truth is that 5,000, probably numbers are closer to 5,000, or 3,000 to 5,000 were killed last year by police, rather than the number the media put out 1,000. It's actually really doesn't mathematically add up, and of course they're going to be putting damage control on the mainstream media. You can't really trust anything that's put on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, or even British media like BBC, The Sun, or really a lot of Western media, or Al Jazeera is another one you cannot trust, or there's that one that's in France 24. Well, you can't trust anything from the West anymore because all corporate and special interests control it. I support RT as the biggest private media source I support because they do get the truth out there. Maybe not every single fact in the truth movement, or even a lot of them that they don't. A lot of stuff they don't cover, but they at least get the basics down, and they have op-ed writers, talk about stuff like the New World Order, talk about even depopulation, which is it is good that a media source like that is talking about that because it legitimizes our concerns. It really brings to to the rest of the people, to the sheeple of America, that if anybody, they're not going to be the sheeple of America. If they are looking at RT, well, they realize we're not crazy because it's actually well-known journalists are worried about this. And Ukraine, they cover very well, of course, because they have been at the receiving end of the demonization about what is going on in Ukraine. Russia is being blamed for the troubles of what goes on in Ukraine, but it's the United States for funding. The United States government funded the West Ukrainian government. The United States government funded the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And now the Ukrainian government is, bringing up evoking the same kind of nationalistic sentiments that were in Nazi Germany. And many of the same things are going on in Ukraine. And it's scary. And the West Ukrainian government gets all this aid from the West. Well, the East Ukrainian government the East Ukrainian military, the rebels are putting up a great fight, despite that they don't really receive much funding from overseas, and they actually don't. And that's also another thing, is that they said that the West Ukraine, or that the East Ukraine shot it down. They don't even have that kind of technology. They don't have an air force. They don't have Buck missiles and this kind of stuff. they really just have, almost like, home weapons that you would have in your house. The East Ukrainians are fighting for independence, and I hope they receive it soon. And this fight has already went on over a year, which is nothing like the Syrian civil war. It's now went on for over 4 years. The Syrian civil war has raged since 2011. And right now, in Ukraine, we have many different groups that are, rebels that are trying to. The rebels are trying to get this independence for the people, but it's really going to be difficult. Let's face the truth: is that this monster that's been created in West Ukraine doesn't seem to stop. Doesn't seem to stop committing genocide against ethnic Russians, and the ethnic Russian people are being discriminated against. And one of the scariest things is that is that the United States, again, the people, really, even educated people, I would say. I don't know if you could say that educated. People that are not complete idiots. You think you'd almost have to be so ignorant about politics not to at least go online and look this up, But we'll start saying stuff about all these. They're Putin's goons, the East Ukrainian rebels. No, they're not. They are loosely tied. About as tied as something else we're going to talk about is these Houthis with Iran. They're not. They're not under direct command. They are being helped by the Russians because nobody else will help them overseas. It seems like, and people allege stuff about the Russians helping militarily the Ukrainians, but it's all lies. And it's like what the United Arab Emirates embassy had to say when there were these allegations when the allegations came out about the Russians invading Ukraine. They showed this picture of like toy trucks going on the ground, and they're like, it's like new evidence that Russia is invading Ukraine. Because it's how hokey it looks. It's not even a good attempt. But Americans will just swallow anything that is spat out by the mainstream media. Unfortunately, they became sheeple. The sheeple of America. It's unfortunate. But to call them, it's like, I know people don't even like to hear that word, but we have to call them what they are. They're rounded up like sheeple. And these sheeple won't even. They not only don't know what's going on, they don't even want to have a clue of what's going on. They do not at all want to know what's going on, and you can tell they just want to live in La La Land. Not every American's like that. And I'm half American myself. I can't say that I can't be sitting here from a hypocritical perspective and make fun of all Americans at fussing when I'm half American myself, and that a lot of these people in this great network are American, full American. Or that, even the person that pretty much runs this network, even though she has a little bit of a blood from another country, but that other country speaks English, but she's still American, I would say. But a lot of Americans, the great majority, my generation, unfortunately, I'm not going to exempt my generation from this. I'm going to criticize them heavily, and I'm hoping they're listening right now. I'm hoping that the ones that really went after me, said all this nasty stuff about my political stances, called me crazy, painting me out like a bad guy. And the one that's being called crazy. When I think you have to be crazy, your moral parts of your brain would have to be shut down for you when I throw out the truth, unless you're just not reading it. If you are reading it and don't do anything about it, what is wrong with you? At least inform other people when information war, protest, go do something. I'm not saying you have to pick up an AK-47 and turn into Rambo. I'm saying that you have to tell your friends there's many ways you can fuck the system without getting violent. Grow your own food so you don't have to eat GMOs. Stop drinking the fluoride in the water. That's what keeping people docile. Part of the reason, at least. Stop using unnecessary pharmaceuticals and go to more natural ways to cure your problems. Like if for example, especially there's so many natural remedies and stuff. It seems like there's a natural remedy for everything. It seems like pharmaceuticals are barely necessary, in my opinion, if at all necessary. It's all synthetic. All the synthetic, supposed medicine. I just call them drugs. Those are real drugs. Marijuana's not a drug. That's medicine. I'll say that. I know I'm getting way off a tangent, but when you have no one to anchor yourself, when you've been on air for almost an hour by yourself, you tend to go on tangents. And it's not like I'm not used to going solo, but if you heard my solo shows, I went on tangents. I went on tangents with a host on the air. And I will still go on tangents even on this show, even though that I'm not as high up in charge as I was in my old network, where it really didn't matter if I went on tangents or not, because I was the one that kind of was in charge of what was put on my show. And, I'm still in charge of what to put on my show. There's nobody telling me to put stuff on the show. But I would, you do sometimes try to make as quality, not only just quality of the show, but you try to just going on tangents sometimes doesn't work as a radio host. It just doesn't look good. So you try, and you're trying to work for the network and trying to make the network look good, make yourself look good. But I haven't put out the number, and it's been a while since I put it out, so I'm going to put it out again. 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296. And this war in Ukraine, I actually have a few friends on Facebook that are from that region, and like I said, my friend Rahman, he was going to be over there doing maybe the biggest thing an activist could do, but actually fighting a revolution with the East Ukrainian rebels. It would only be the second American volunteer. There's actually an American volunteer. There's one American volunteer in the Novorossiya forces, which is one of the biggest armed group, I think. There's the Novorossiya forces, the Donbass People's Militia, Vostok Brigade, Russian Orthodox Army, Sparta Battalion, Army of the Southeast, Great Dawn Army, Prizak Brigade, and a few other forces involved. In the foreign volunteers, there's 100-plus German volunteers on the East Ukrainian forces. There's some Belarusians. There's some Russians, of course. Also, yes, Ossetians. Ossetians are a breakaway region of Georgia. Remember in 2008, Russia did invade Georgia over the fact of Saakashvili's repression of the people of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And then Saakashvili committed many war crimes. And you know what Saakashvili's doing? That loser is working with the Ukrainians right now, the West Ukrainians. Not the good Ukrainians, the East Ukrainians. Not to say everybody in West Ukraine, definitely not everybody in West Ukraine is supportive of the West Ukrainian government, but the West Ukrainian government is evil. It's evil. It has a direct, it's a direct transition of a guy going from private sector to the public sector of their country. This guy takes over This guy, an oligarch, is now in charge of their country as the president, turns a blind eye to thugs and fascists, actually probably orders these thugs to commit terror in East Ukraine, right sector, and they're actually might be commissioned directly by the government. The military as well commits genocide under his orders, and Petro Poroshenko does not really even deny too much to being a fascist. And the ideology of the party that pretty much started Euromaidan was a fascist party. Svoboda Party. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm pretty sure that is completely wrong. But anyways, getting my point across here. The point is that the West Ukrainian government is despicable, and they're founded off of neo-Nazis. And there's literally people with swastikas on their shirts doing the Nazi salute in Kiev. And there's one picture where they have a Ukrainian flag. I think it's the one down with the fascist flag, a Nazi flag, and NATO all in one picture posing. And it's a very representative of what is actually going on in West Ukraine. There was another picture, I believe, in New York City with I don't know, maybe that might have been a Photoshop picture, because that one was ridiculous. The irony, but also at the same time reality that was in that picture. Because again, West Ukraine, a fascist that openly support people that kill Jews, and then another person holding an Israeli flag. That is true though. The Israelis fund the West Ukrainians. However, it's you'd think that somebody that'd be supportive of that'd be supportive of the West Ukrainians would probably wouldn't be supportive of Israel as well, but maybe they would be. Because you'd think that somebody would be anti-Semitic to be supportive of West Ukraine, but I don't think that's the deal. These people are just anti-Russian. They're very Ukrainian nationalistic, and they're pro-Nazi, definitely. West Ukrainian government, it's an international situation that is being ignored by the media. It's been going on for a while. It's been going on now. I've had a few shows about it. I've had Roman, who's Russian. He's from Russia. That's his actual name. He has Michael Hallman. This is his American name. I'm just saying that because there's people that might get that confused. And I used to refer to him as Michael Hallman on the airwaves. That was his radio name. It's like Chris J. My radio name. Is it a pseudonym? Is it not? You can guess for yourselves, but I'll never. At least for now. Anyways, the people that actually know me on Facebook know that Chris J is a pseudonym, and I'll just say it is a pseudonym. But yeah, Michael Hallman was his radio name. I knew that Roman. I thought Roman was a name that he'd given himself. Well, but I found out Roman was actually his real name. Like he has to use Michael Hallman in the United States. So now I'm going to call him Roman, because Roman is his Russian name. That's the one that his real parents gave to him. It must suck being 2,000 miles away from your real home in a country that doesn't like you. A country that, was his story, was he was thrown in jail for 1 month, was originally 3 months that he was sentenced to, for underage drinking. But here's the catch: at the age of 20. And not only was he sentenced, he had a bullshit hindering and obstruction charge for asking why he was being arrested. He was in a small town, thrown into a small hick prison. And probably that hick prison, that's probably why. Or not prison, but a jail, because it was a short time. But not really that short considering the charge. I mean, I'm pretty sure if a rich person did that, it would be a fine at the most. And what's $200 to somebody that has to a family that makes millions of dollars a year? but because he was Russian, he was discriminated by the police, and they gave him the ultimate punishment they could for such a petty charge. I mean, that's what it's like. What's next? We're going to be giving people weeks in jail for jaywalking. I mean, underage drinking is definitely not something that, especially for the young people who are listening. I'm young too. I'm 17. I don't drink because I don't see a purpose in doing it. I don't feel like damaging my brain cells because I know that enough drinking will damage your brain cells at a young age. But I don't see it's a thing that's promoted by the media instead of weed, and they're in these same it's actually the alcohol industry that, along with private prisons, there's many different people that keep weed illegal. Original reason was actually a person in the timber industry, William Randolph Hearst, which you might have heard of it. Randolph Hearst ran a spear campaign, very racist too. That's where Reefer Madness came in. Reefer Madness scared the shit out of people back then, 78 years ago. You have to remember that things were a lot different. And he even wrote stuff like that this will enable black people to commit rape against white women. That's something that he had said, I think. And that scared everybody, and so the people supported the legalization of it, and it was really because hemp could be used as an alternative to tree paper, and it should be. It's an environmentally friendly alternative. In fact, I think that one acre of hemp can do something like, it's a drastic amount of trees they could save if we use that for paper instead. And also another thing is, not only it says so many industrial uses. You can make clothes out of it. They used to make it for ropes. So they used to make it for a lot of stuff. They have hemp is one of the most useful substances, like with so many industrial uses on the planet. It has it's actual part that's for usage to get intoxicated with. I don't even think that's the right word for marijuana, because I don't think it's really an intoxication. To get intoxicated with the actual marijuana. Marijuana has so many health uses. It cures 34 compounds of cancer and cures countless diseases. So of course, Big Pharma does not want it legal, and that's why they're trying anything. They're running in the mainstream media, still smearing Colorado and these other states for doing it, for legalizing marijuana, and you're down overseas, Uruguay legalized marijuana, and then they're saying that they broke UN drug laws. When who's breaking UN drug laws? The United States government, because they are giving arms to drug cartels in Mexico via Operation Fast and Furious. They were the ones who trafficked the cocaine all the way from South America to the United States. They're the ones who brought the crack into the black communities, destabilized the Black Panther movements of the 70s. In the 80s, they did that, and the whistleblower just ended up committing suicide. Of course, committing suicide in these terms of activists really means that he was shot. And they just said that. That's the cover story. But that whistleblower, he said it all. It was brought into the LA hood, and then in the LA hood, the crack. I mean, there's very few things that have been more detrimental to the black communities of the United States. And I'm not saying that there's a specific war on them. There's a war on all the lower class. It's the class issue. It's not a race issue. It's not an issue of sex, as between female and male. Not religion. It's not even an issue of religion. It's an issue about money and class. Money is the root of all evil, as the Bible said. And as the root of all evil, these super rich They have a lot of evil tied to them. So maybe that's why they act in such evil ways. And one thing they've done, an evil act that's been done by the, besides or we've already talked about what they've been, the Venezuelan opposition does, or the horrors by the West Ukrainian government. Let's talk about Syria, since we haven't touched up on it yet. Syria, they tell you that Bashar al-Assad, on the mainstream media, Bashar al-Assad is this horrible man, apparently. That this guy is responsible, apparently for all the deaths that's happened in Syria, that he's used chemical weapons, blah, 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 that the rebels are so good at people and with such great morals. Just like the Mujahideen, those were rebels against the Soviet legitimate Afghani government. Wait a minute, what happened with Mujahideen? Well, they spawned off terror groups. They were actually really a terror group themselves, funded by Islam, powered by Islamism. And wait a minute, what are these groups in Syria? The Free Syrian Army? The Al-Nusra? Well, that sounds a lot like Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda? ISIS? Wait a minute, those are all Islamic terrorist groups, but which side are they? Aren't they on Bashar al-Assad's side? And this is the thoughts of a sheeple. But then, they realized, wait a minute, they're on the people that were supposed to support the Syrian rebels, including ISIS. In fact, ISIS is not just a Syrian rebel group. It's the biggest Syrian rebel group, even bigger than the Free Syrian Army. It was made as a proxy against Bashar al-Assad. It was made just like the Mujahideen against the Soviet, pro-Soviet government in Afghanistan and Kabul at the time, or in Tripoli. They funded those terrorists, and there were actually like neo-Nazi groups in Libya that went after Gaddafi. They were actually the ones that had they actually were the ones, I think, that chased down Gaddafi right before he was brutally murdered. But just like in those different scenarios, those countries back at those different times, respectively, we have Syria, and Syria, as Syria has literally, United States are funding terrorists in Syria, and they admitted it in 2013. John McCain, when referring to the rebel groups in Syria, said, yes, we were funding ISIS. And I don't know what, it's like I'm giving all these gestures, and it'd be a lot funnier if I was doing this on video. Maybe I should switch to a video podcast one day, but this is just radio. But sometimes, then again, I would look. It's like you would see me looking up stuff sometimes from time to time if I had it on camera. But this is my gesture right there. It's funny. It's like because John McCain did say that. It might have been a slip, but he did say it, and it probably was a slip. He probably meant to say Syrian rebels, and he met al-Baghdadi. It's true. He met al-Baghdadi, who al-Baghdadi's identity is questionable. There's a lot of speculation to say that this guy, al-Baghdadi, has an Israeli persona, which is actually him, and respectively, there's the al-Baghdadi has his al-Baghdadi is one persona, and you know which one that is, the one the media has shown. And then Shaman Elliott is the real one. Shaman Elliott is al-Baghdadi. And they say that he is really a Mossad agent. And I think that because considering that a lot of those ISIS members have been revealed to be Israeli, and they have been shown to have been treated in Israeli hospitals. I'm not kidding. Along with the Free Syrian Army were treated in Israeli hospitals. And let me remind you some of the acts that the Free Syrian Army that are so moderate have done. Crucifixion of Christians. Sounds very moderate. Suicide bombings. Nothing out of the ordinary here. eating the organs of slain opponents on the battlefield of a Syrian Arab army commander. Nothing. That was it. And actually, we'll just say that he had a nice liver dinner there that night. If anyone hasn't seen that video, actually, if I have not seen that video, just know that video exists, because that video is very disturbing. It's disgusting me right now just thinking about it. And the Free Syrian Army sold off one of the journalists that was beheaded by ISIS. I think it was James Foley, and that was revealed by the government later. So the Free Syrian Army and ISIS are working together, along with, of course, Al-Nusra Islamic Front. What's another major one? Al-Qaeda. They're all these. It's really only two sides of this conflict. The United States and Israel and the Gulf states are funding the terrorists in Syria. Russia, Iran are working together with the Syrian government to try to end the civil war, along with Hezbollah. There's a pro-Palestinian group in there, I think. I have to look them up so I can get the name of them. And the Kurds, which the United States acts like they protected the Kurds, but when ISIS is striking at the door of going to, I need to look that. Man, I haven't looked that up in a while. Want to go right there? Was striking on the door of a major city in Kurdistan, West Kurdistan, which is a disputed area. Syrian government and Kurdistan usually would be fighting at each other, not fighting physically, but in the political realm about the disputed lands. However, they have taken an alliance with each other, and they are working to go against the Syrian rebels and ISIS, who have persecuted them for being Kurdish. And there's revolutionary Kurds that are fighting there. And let's see, that city, I'm going to tell you that where there was a huge battle. Kobani. I just thought Kobani. Wow, I can't believe I just couldn't get that one. That was a few months ago, so maybe it was out of my mind for that. But it was such a long battle. I don't know how I can forget about it. It went all the way from August till January. It was a giant battle, but eventually the Syrian government and the Kurds fortunately won. And the militia, I think it's a militia that's pro-Palestinian. They're like Palestinians that fight along with Assad, which is good because there's some Palestinians that actually oppose Assad, ironically, even though Assad unilaterally, there's no denying, unilaterally opposes Zionism. And it's actually, there's the one, it's the Palestinian Front for Liberation of Palestine. Says the General Command. It's based in Syria. They're anti-Zionist as well, and this one's actually based in Syria. There's another one very similar. It's actually in Palestine. It's like a revolutionary version of Hamas, and they're not really. They go to different tactics. I'd say that they're the better version of Hamas 2.0. I don't really support everything Hamas does, because Hamas sometimes legitimizes Israel's. They don't legitimize what Israel does, but the media uses Hamas's actions to do so, because they literally shoot practically bottle rockets at Israel because they've stolen all their land, and people freak out. Like one Israeli civilian was killed, compared to 2,000 Palestinian civilians. 8,000 were injured. 80,000 were made homeless. Now, the killing of any innocent people is wrong, but let's put it in perspective here. 2,000 versus 1. Actually, it was 4. 4 were killed, compared to 2,000. Whole different skill there. It's a whole different skill. In Syria, Syria is one of those countries that's anti-Zionist, anti-Rothschild. People there generally know about the New World Order. It's not like the United States where people generally don't know about the New World Order. In Syria, they do know. They're educated. They are educated about the New World Order. I know that. I actually have a Syrian friend on Facebook. interesting. It's a painful situation. It's heartbreaking to see it doesn't go on so long. When the United States funds mercenaries, that's what they are. They're not rebels. They are terrorist mercenaries. And not only that, they're traitors. But some of these people are not even traitors because they're not from Syria. These people are from 83 different countries. They're from all over the Middle East, and a lot of them from Turkey. And in fact, a lot of the ISIS in Syria come from Turkey across the border. Turkish government lets them go there. There's ISIS merchandise on sale in the capital of Turkey. There is an ISIS in Istanbul. And in Istanbul, there is a embassy for ISIS that grants Turkish people passports to go to Syria and Iraq. Let's not forget that they actually have more control over Iraq than in Syria. In Syria, the Syrian government is cleaning them out. But in Iraq, they're not. I mean, I hear that's a bit exaggerated how close they are to taking over, but they are. I mean, they have a lot. They have a lot of territory over there in control, and also they have some in Libya too, which Egypt was striking out recently. In fact, what's funny is the United States, no shock, were pissed that Egypt had struck ISIS without their permission. That's not shocking at all because the United States supports ISIS, and they want ISIS in Libya because they are the enemies to the Green Revolutionaries. The Green Revolution is Gaddafi. The Green Revolution is still going on. I mean, there's still people that are still fighting in favor of Gaddafi in Libya. I mean, the dust has not settled, and there's still a chance that that time of greatness where Libya was prospering under Gaddafi and people lived very cheaply, and there's people were free in many ways and had rights towards they were not held down by, like, for example, if they had a kid here in the United States, they'd be forced to work. Both the parents had maternity and paternity leave for like a year, which that's how it should be. People that have young children should not be working. They should be taking care of their kid. And it's almost like here in America, they have almost the mentality nowadays. It's like, let's have, kids, they raise themselves in one way, but in another way, they don't have any freedom. They don't play in the park or anything. But, parents don't give them much attention. They have technology and stuff like that. They're on their tablets, so they're not outside like back in the day either. So it's a weird scenario, and they don't. So they're free and not free at the same time. But I'd say it's not free. The kids nowadays are indoctrinated into a system of being not free and being a slave and via the school system, but in the indoctrination system, it should be called. Anyways, I want to look at what's going on in Libya here. I want to see. I'm trying to find one of the name of these groups. There was like a certain groups that were fighting in favor of Gaddafi still, and the dust is unsettled. In fact, the parts of the old Green government, including parts of Gaddafi's children himself, may take over Libya soon. Well, not soon, but may down the road, because right now the one that the United States put in, that was the dictatorship. It was this government was practically based off of terrorists that had taken over the country, much like what happened in Syria. Syria would become like a Sharia law state if Assad falls, which I don't think he will fall. And also, let's remind everybody, Assad's not a dictator. Assad's faced an election. He faced an election with two other candidates last time, and he had 88.7% of the vote. They didn't want to change ship in the middle of a civil war. And why could the Americans can't get that? The American government couldn't get it through their head that the rest of the world recognized as legitimate, because it was legitimate. But to them, it was not legitimate because it didn't go in their favor, just like the Crimea votes. Or, they probably would say they probably would say all the Donetsk and Lugansk votes would be the same way. And now we're about 10 minutes left of the show, but if anybody wants to get a last little any tidbit in there, I'm going to put number one last time. We actually we have just a few minutes of airtime, actually. 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. I like callers, like conversation. We had a guy named Chris last time from Canada. Came on the show. That was pretty interesting. It's cool. Somebody with my own name, and somebody from an international caller on the first show. Of it being on new networks, kind of crazy. I'm still trying to think of who my first callers on my first two shows, including Stabled Radio. I mean, my first two networks I used to do. And I would say this show is kind of a continuous, kind of the same stuff I've been talking about. Voice of Rebellion was still the name, but back at Stabled Radio. Which I know some of the listeners are still wondering what's going on with that. And the show should be being shared over there so people can see on that platform as well. But UCY TV is the home of this network now. That is UCY TV. I can say my throat is getting very sore right now. It's been talking so long about Syria, and this is horrific stuff. I want to put up one last thing: is that what about the chemical attacks? People are going to ask, didn't Assad still do that? Well, there's no evidence of that. In fact, it was neutral to more likely that the rebels did it. There's YouTube videos where the rebels were claiming to have chemical weapons and showed warheads of chemical weapons that they were launching off. This is a UN investigation. So the UN is going to be biased toward the United States. Imagine what the real investigation would show. Probably to say outright the Syrian rebels did the chemical weapons attacks. Also, the one that they kept scaring everybody about in 2013 when they were about to invade Syria, they showed right before they were supposed to invade, they kept showing this, pictures of the one from Damascus. Damascus was a Saudi black op. They brought in movie crews. Practically it was a Hollywood film they had done. And this Hollywood style film was supposed to, show that Syria had been attacked, or that Damascus had been attacked by Assad's forces with chemical weapons. But that was simply not true. Assad got rid of his chemical weapons stockpile. They were trying to say he was doing it too slow, but he eventually did get rid of it. I guess it was slow at first because these are chemical weapons. You don't want to dispose of chemical weapons too quickly. I mean, you're trying to. There's not something that you can just throw in the dumpster, and it took a whole year, which that's what they gave him. But it's slow at first, and then it eventually sped up towards the end. And it got done, so they didn't have an excuse to invade. But you know what they did? ISIS. It scared everybody about ISIS, a proxy that they had admitted to funding just a year before when they were talking about attacking Assad. And now, they invade, and then once they invade, they start attacking Syrian government sites, but not ISIS. Warehouses that belong to the Syrian government, oil refineries. Actual skirmishes, I think, have happened between the Syrian Arab Army and United States soldiers. There's a few on the ground there. And also, a few that are on the ground there, they airstrike pro-Syrian government sites. And also, ISIS was running, what was going on? Syrian ISIS was being chased down by Syrian Arab Army jets. But what does Israel do? Israel does this. They chase down the Syrian army jets and let ISIS go, and they run back into Israel. Yes, but do they do a terror attacks in Israel? No, because they are being financed by Israel. Anyways, it's 10:55, and now that I mentioned Israel enough, I wanted to mention there was also rampant use of fake photos during the Syrian civil war, stuff from Iraq that they were trying to say Syria was doing, which I find that funny only because of the fact that it's like the Fox News picture of their actions that they did or the people they supported down in Venezuela, the opposition, and trying to use that against people that are legitimately protesting Baltimore. Also another fact about Syria is that tidbit there is that it just seems like they can't. It seems like the evidence is overwhelming. Also, just pictures online, Israel training ISIS. But I really gotta get to the announcement next week, June 21st, 2015. We are going to have the following guests: Ronald Kukal, Larry Thorne, and not confirmed, but I'll say it anyways, Joe Lentini. These people survived the USS Liberty, an attack by Israel, to attempt to false flag the United States into attacking Egypt for them, but the Russians intervened and prevented the Israelis from firing on the United States any further. They had already sent a lot of the Americans overboard into the water, and then they were strafing them. 30-plus Americans died. Over 100 were wounded. I think that number was in the hundreds more. Actually, I'll look that up real quick so I can get the exact numbers for you. USS Liberty, I think I know the exact numbers, but I just want to be sure on this. The ship was heavily damaged, with 171 wounded, 34 killed. If I'm reading that right. Yep. And they say Israel said that it was a mistake, and the United States said it was agreed that it was a mistake, but there's a lot of evidence it wasn't. These people will actually tell you because they survived the attack. It's the crazy thing. I was able to track these people down, and I wasn't I tracked them down and I asked them to interview, and they were very well in the interview. I can't wait to have them on. So next week we're gonna have actual USS Liberty survivors. So I was going to talk about a lot in the truth movement. The truth movement. Now we'll get to see an interview here at UCY. This interview at UCY will actually interview the people that survived the horrendous USS Liberty attack. But anyways, thanks everyone for listening to tonight's show. The show will be on YouTube in a couple hours, and you can find if people who tuned in late, the link will be on my wall tomorrow for the YouTube, and you can watch it on there. Anyways, we should be reaching the radio soon, so thanks everybody for tuning in. We got a minute according to Jules, even though my clock says 10:58, so the music should be playing. She says 45 seconds. But USS Liberty survivors, two or three USS Liberty survivors. We have two confirmed. Larry Thorne. And let me also note something. Larry Thorne is an anti-Zionist, and he is Jewish himself. Just saying. Ronald Kukal and possibly Joe Lentini. And these people have stayed comrades since. And also, to all the people, stay vigilant, stay informed. And we'll catch you next week for the great show. Next week.
Cyanine, how have you been? I think we're gonna need your help again. Remember the passports from Britain, my friend? We need 20 more from Saudi and Yemen. What is coming is big and it is gonna sell. Much bigger than the King David Hotel. America's military should never say that. We are the bomb when we dress like the Arabs. US will fight our war physically. It is ironic, but